Hey everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for making a long journey down here to this end of the convention center when everything else is probably happening all over the other end, so everybody's getting their steps in. So today we're here for State Parks Enterprise Collaboration and Natural Cultural Resources Management session here. My name is Mike Walk. I am a senior account manager for the states of Arizona and Colorado. And thank you for joining us today. So today we're going to look a little bit about kind of this approach here, looking around the geographic approach, optimizing ingestion of field delivered data, enterprise and IT best practices, real-time decision making, and enabled spatial analysis through this presentation. What we have today is we're going to a little bit of the agenda. We're going to obviously we introduced the session to content. Today's session is Tennessee State Parks from Framework to Field to the Future with Andrew McDonough and Lee Fuller. We're going to leave about 5 minutes for questions. If y'all are familiar with the ESRI Events app, there's two pieces to that. There is a opportunity to go in and fill out a survey, so your feedback is very valuable. So if you have a chance, if myself, Lee, and Andrew did a great job, please let the app know. And there's also a feature in here for Q&A. If you have a question that pops up during the session, type it, log in, type it in there. I'll be monitoring it so we don't forget it. And then we'll also use the old-fashioned raise your hands and get it done. So. Real quick, Andrew is a GIS specialist with the Master's GIS from the University of Redlands, right next to ESRI headquarters up there, and a BS in Park and Recreation and Tourism from the University of Vermont. We've traveled, huh? All over. Some of his most enjoyable mapping experiences have been in the last few years working with federal and state governments, doing GIS and parks planning, creating ESRI web application solutions, and the GIS and wilderness and field trails inventory in the field. With Tennessee State Parks, Andrew works with his team to take ideas proposed by a variety of park staff to fruition, backing and educating park management with the data, mapping and virtual tasks to him daily. He enjoys maps, travel, and photography. So with that being said, let's switch over to the presentation. It is all y'all's.
All right, well, thank you guys all for coming to our presentation today. We are the Tennessee State Parks GIS team, and we're here to talk to you about an idea, the framework that we came up with, and how we took it out into the field, and where in the future we're going with it. But before we start off, has anybody been to Tennessee before? Show of hands. No way. All right, that's awesome. That's a great start. Has anyone been to a Tennessee State Park before? That's even better. All right, we're making it out of Nashville. Next time we'll get you guys out of the honky tonks into the parks. But either way, we're going to show you a little bit about what our parks look like and how we are taking natural and cultural resources management into the field using GIS. So why we're here today? Well, we have 56 state parks throughout our state, and they're all free. So that's another reason to come visit. One of the few state park systems like that. We're two full-time GIS specialists supporting the entire state operations for parks, and there's over 500 park rangers. A lot of our day-to-day work is cartography, making trail maps, which is the really cool stuff, but also some people would say the cooler stuff is making the apps. Sometimes we're making a specific state park app that's really specialized, or maybe our leadership team needs a big statewide effort, so we'll design a general app for that. But today we're going to talk to you about something that combines both of these. Before I get into the GIS side of this, I want to tell you about our park rangers. So who are they? They're people who wear 3 different hats, which is kind of unique. It's different than the Park Service where it might be split up. Our park rangers are certified law enforcement. They have to go to the police academy. They're also cultural and natural resources manager. They're out in the dirt doing actual field work. And they're educators. They have to be able to take you on a canoe trip and lead a night program on astronomy at the same time. So there are these really intelligent beings out there And a lot of them right now have gone to school with different backgrounds, which is really cool, this new crop of people. Some of them studied environmental science, some of them were wildlife biologists, some of them are historians specializing in a specific era. And that's all helped them get jobs at kind of our unique different parks. But the newest crop of people have all gone to school and they have introductory GIS classes for the first time. So they're coming into the state park system and they're actually asking us, okay, where's the GIS tools? I want to start doing these projects. And so, okay, we got to support this new class of rangers. So this has been happening over the last 3 years more and more. So what we did is we sent out a survey to all our park rangers and we got about 100 respondents asking them, what would you do with GIS if you could? And what we found is they all had a special project they wanted to do at their park, all really unique different things. But two of the biggest topics were cultural and natural resources management. And so we thought about this and we started to think about apps that we could design that could meet the needs of all of this at once. We worked with our ESRI reps to figure out what kind of licensing we need, and we assigned one field worker license, now a mobile worker license, to each park. Some of our parks have up to 7 rangers, and they've taken this introductory training that's going to let them use the application that we've designed. This will allow them, being a field worker, a mobile worker, will allow them to edit in the field and collect data and contribute to some bigger initiatives. And with that, I'll turn it over to Leah to tell you what it is that we've created.
To serve this need for data collection out in our parks, we started looking into field maps. Field maps provides many benefits to us, including being able to manipulate smart forms with calculated expressions and adding the options of photos and attachments along with our data. But the biggest benefit for us was the ability to collect this data in very remote areas using field maps offline capability. Right now, our field map contains 2 layers, cultural resources and natural resources, based on the most pressing requests from our park staff. We are currently field testing our map and its capabilities this summer, but we have big plans for the future. As you can see, we've named our field map One Smart Park because our hope is that this map will eventually enable park staff to collect many other types of data to help them make smart, data-driven decisions using online tools. To give you an idea of how this works out in the field, here's an example of collecting a cultural resources point for a Civil War earthwork site. When you create a point, you're given the options on the left to choose from based on the resource type. These are 6 of our most commonly found cultural resources in our state parks. Once a type is chosen, the smart form appears and asks for some, let me play this so you can hear it. There you go. Once the smart form appears and you can add in some data specific to the point, you also have the option to take a photo. You can see in this video, we collect data for park name, name of feature, feature subtype, and for this particular feature, we're going to choose earthworks, time period, historical reference, which includes things like CCC, Trail of Tears, Revolutionary War, and for this example, Civil War. But we also collect fields that help us manage these resources, such as recording any negative impacts or actions needed when a new feature is found. For instance, this spot is a local hotspot for off-roading, so for human activity damage is what we chose for the negative impact field, and for the action needed field we choose needs protection. Then we click submit to record the point, and now it's visible on the map with the other layers. The natural resources data set contains a few types of layers to give park staff several options based on their needs. On the left, you can see options for collecting wildlife points in areas and plant points in areas. Here's an example of collecting a plant restoration area at a park. You can see that the management area and region fields are pre-calculated based on which park name is selected at the top. This restoration area is specifically for eastern hemlock trees that have been infected with the invasive insect called the hemlock woolly adelgid, or HWA. This layer collects data for area name, common and scientific name of the species, habitat description, the number of plants recorded in the area, a type such as native, not native, invasive, a status which is pulled from the IUCN Red List, And we also collect threats or evidence of disturbance. In this case, we would mention the HWA infestation, and for actions needed, we would choose yes because it needs treatment. And the best thing about this data is that it can be updated over time. So the next time a park ranger visits this site to treat the trees, they can take new pictures, update the fields, and when they go to assess the treatment, they can do so again. Projects like these will give us a statewide record of invasive species projects in our state parks. The natural resources dataset also has a landscape features layer. You can see some of the feature types on the left with our custom symbology. From the floodplains of the Mississippi River to the Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee's landscape is very diverse, so we have many options to choose from. For example, this is Fall Creek Falls, and when recording this point, I noticed a lot of litter at the bottom of the falls. And so under evidence of disturbance, I left a note. I also chose yes for actions needed, and then in the field notes, I suggested a ranger install a leave no trace sign. You may also note that this layer and all of our other layers have a public view field option with yes or no options. This field is super important for our future applications so that we can limit the features that are visible and accessible to the public. So if I had a cave that contained a rare species and I don't want the public going off trail to try and find that cave, I can mark the public field as no, but our internal maps, where our park rangers use for management purposes, will still be able to see this feature. This dataset will also be helpful for search and rescue operations by providing a complete inventory of landscape features to provide insight on where a missing person may be located or injured.
So once we've collected all of these points in the field, it's time to actually start managing these. So the collected points that we have are going to allow us to interpret, preserve, and protect all of these resources. So here's a couple examples at 3 different parks. Old Stone Fort Archaeological Park is an archaeological park. There was a big Native American settlement there for a long time, the confluence of 2 rivers. And there's all these big earthworks throughout the park. And one of the park rangers leads a summer solstice hike because those earthworks align with the summer solstice in June. So if you want to get up early morning in June when you're visiting us, you can take part in this hike. But now these rangers know where these points are, so they can document all these Native American artifacts throughout the park and see these on an interpretive tour. It also allows us to do better preservation. There's a handful of Tennessee state parks that were built on the Tennessee River, and if you know the history of the Tennessee River and TVA, a lot of these were turned into lakes. So Johnsonville was Tennessee River turned into Kentucky Lake, a reservoir, and that meant in the 1940s they had to evacuate the town. They all left behind their buildings, and nature has since reclaimed it where we have this state park. Now these park rangers who are really big into the history side of things are going out and finding these old building remnants out there, taking points with our field maps and bringing it back into a web map that I made that has the USGS historic topo maps on it. They were able to find that one of the points they took actually correlated to the exact spot of an old African American schoolhouse that was in the old town of Johnsonville, which is going to help them learn everything that used to be at the park before people had to leave it. The most important thing is we got to protect our cultural resources. That's why we're identifying them to begin with. So if we get a map of all these cultural resources, we can plan our trails and our mountain bike trail systems to not disturb them. Or we can kind of do the opposite. We could build a boardwalk that highlights these resources, whether it's an old mill and a milling site. We could have a tour that goes through all of those.
The natural resources data that's collected in one smart park can help us better manage resources through better data-driven decisions. Park staff are able to document rare and endangered plants in order to monitor their populations. Some of our state parks have a plant called wild American ginseng, which is known to have roots with medicinal properties, making them extremely valuable and protected. By documenting these ginseng populations in our parks, we can make sure they remain protected from illegal harvesting. Park staff can also study animal sighting data for habitat research, whether it be the non-native wild boar that destroy native plants, or locating bald eagle nests on the lake in order to plan an educational boat tour for the public. Our state parks also participate in a national effort to remove invasive species called the Weed Wrangle Project. By inventorying invasive species that we can use for these weed wrangle projects and being able to track the effectiveness of invasive species removal, One Smart Park is helping us prevent native habitat loss. As I mentioned before, we are currently field testing cultural and natural resources, but our future One Smart Park field map will contain many other layers such as park assets, signage, accessible assets, trails, and utilities. By including all of these layers in one field map, it enables park staff to collect and edit multiple features at the same time while out in the field. This will reduce time in the field and also allow them to see surrounding features when trail or project planning. This also means they will only have to download one offline map before heading out to the field. By providing everything park staff need in one map, we're hoping to have a complete inventory of all of these layers for each park in order to better our park operations in the future.
And so, speaking of the future, there's probably a lot of questions that are already coming to your mind. And one of the things that we've noticed as we started testing this with a few rangers at our parks is that precision is needed to a certain degree. And so what we did is we purchased some GPS units which will communicate by Bluetooth so that when they're using the offline maps, they can get a better satellite signal going to their phones. We're not the ones trying to find the exact location and go back and find that arrowhead again, but we are getting a general idea. And with that, we're gonna be able to share these. So it's not just a web layer that we put into our own apps, but rather a service. So we're partnering with our external organizations such as the Division of Archaeology, the Division of Natural Areas, and the Division of Forestry, who are all outside of state parks, and making our GIS data available to them. They've long wondered what is going on in state parks as we're managing those on our own. And so now we have a way of sharing that. So if we did find an arrowhead, archaeology we can send that over to them and they can send their people out, the experts in the field, to find more about that and do a dig there. And with that, we are also able to visualize statewide trends and threats. So our natural areas program is really big about invasive species and new and rare species and recovering those. So if we start to document those, we can send those over to the natural areas and they can view these layers because we're all in the same organization at any time. For the cultural folks, the Archaeology or Historic Commission can filter our layers. They can filter that cultural resource layer down to cemeteries. Because we have a person in Tennessee, his entire job is to document the 31,000 cemeteries that he's found so far in Tennessee and doesn't really know all the ones in state parks. So now he's gonna be able to look on our map and see all the ones that our rangers collected. One really cool thing too is interpretation. So a lot of the things we're doing are trying to get ahead of the game when we plan this out and help different divisions. So our interpretation division is going to be able to use this because the Civilian Conservation Corps, they help make a lot of our state parks. They made beautiful buildings and cabins, and they also lived there for a while you're building it. So there's a big record of historic things that they left behind. Now we can build a cultural tour, a statewide level tour where a visitor can go from park to park learning about the impact of the Civilian Conservation Corps, all built upon these points and photographs that were taken using our field maps. And last but not least, this is my favorite part. It's building a 3D virtual interactive park. So all those 7 layers that we showed on the last slide are gonna build this interactive park. Some of those, as we said, will have yes, no turned on for the public, and the ones that do, we're gonna be able to host this. Maybe we'll have a 3D model or a 3D interactive map at our visitor center, so a park goer can plan out what trails they're gonna do and which sites they're gonna see. But also with accessibility, for the first time, before you even get to a park, you can plan your route. But if you can't get to the base of a waterfall, one of our park rangers can take a photo of that, put it in the notes, and build a pop-up that kind of gives some education about that location, and someone who can't make it around to different sites can see the park for the first time. So that's our One Smart Park idea. That's the framework, that's our approach. It's this specialized generalist approach. We're bringing it out into the field using field maps, and in the future, we're kind of bringing together the value and benefits of all of these specialized projects into one place to help realize these. So I hope that we get a chance next year to show you what's new with our One Smart Park. And until then, come visit us at Tennessee State Parks. Thank you.
So we had a question pop up using the app, and Thomas, thank you for using the app. Do rangers use GPS devices with field maps?
They will be using GPS devices with field maps for the ones that need to or want to or trying to get to that level. A lot of the things are just general collection, so the idea is how precise do we need to go. But we did get 8 GPS units, which we're going to ship around to the park rangers who are most interested in using them and give them a chance to do that and see how that accuracy changes using those devices.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Yeah.
When you have people going and updating polygons or points after they've been entered the first time, do you ask that they update existing polygons or that they enter a new polygon depending on what information they're submitting?
I think what we're going to have is a little bit of both, and we've also made it too so you're limited to only updating your own features, because we didn't want someone, and you also cannot delete features. That's something that we have is propose remove. That's a field so that Leah and I can go in and sort through everything that's proposed remove, so we can do kind of a data quality check on that. But we do have the opportunity to redraw that. So say it is an invasive species infestation, we're hoping that you can draw it out the first time, draw that polygon out the second time, and all these rangers are going to be able to pull in this service and symbolize it how they want. So maybe they'll just filter out to invasive species and then symbolize it by date or change the treatment of that.
Out of curiosity, so you're talking about beginning to engage with your state's Department of Archaeology. Do they have data for any cultural resources that you are tracking in your state parks?
They do have data. We are helping manage their GIS system. They have 27,000 documented sites, but they don't want to share that out to our park rangers, understandably. They have a big process. We've developed a web app and a hub page for them in which if you pass a certification, you're a certified archaeologist, you can go in and get that data from them. You have to be on approval. So we have some park rangers that are trying to go through that process so they can be the ones to kind of pull in that data at the same time as looking at our own. But for right now, we're just the provider, and the big thing is we wanted to create a track record because our park rangers move from park to park and we lose that knowledge of where things are. We had some rangers who started documenting right away these Civil War burial sites of different colonels and stuff that we never even knew were in the parks, and he just happened to have that knowledge. So we're kind of building a record at the park level, but we can serve it out to the archaeologists when needed.
I guess sort of a follow-up to that, but with the archaeological data, are you also then using it, I guess in a sort of statistical way to look at things like ARPA violations of these sites where humans, that these resources are being affected by humans and tracking the statistics of, time change and what's going on in terms of those violations?
Yeah, that is definitely something we want to do is as we work with archaeology, show them what we're doing with this application. Say there is human activity, there's human threats to it, they can sort through that data and pull that information. At this point, it's going to be up to them to see what kind of action gets taken, but for the first time, we're showing them where the public interacts with our natural environment the most. So a lot of their sites are on private land, so it's just that the private landowner lets people on their land. But here at state parks, people are going everywhere, all over the place. So it's really good to start getting that record and seeing that human impact.
Was all your data stored in AGOL, or do you have stuff stored outside, just for cultural stuff and privacy issues?
Yeah, all of our stuff is stored in ArcGIS Online, but it's locked down to our organization level right now, and the few rangers that can do that. And as I said, there's some data sets that folks can see everything, but there's some that are just locked down to specific rangers or people who have been vetted.
So do you have like specific groups maybe within there that basically just a cultural group, natural group kind of thing, or?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the accessibility layer that we put in, we have 2 people going around to every state park marking all our handicap accessible features. They're the only ones that can update that feature. It belongs in a group and there's update privileges for that. So they're the only ones that can collect that. Everyone else can see it on the map, but they're the only ones that can make changes to that layer.
So I've got 2 questions for you. So pertaining to some wildlife data that y'all were collecting in parks, do you kind of target or like have a methodology that's behind how that data is collected? Because I mean, it can be pretty willy-nilly, just opportunistic, I assume, pretty frequently. So I was just wondering if you target to like your state's SGCN method to the madness for people to follow.
Yeah, definitely. So as I said, they're wildlife specialists at the park, but they're not our biggest state specialists. So we have the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency, and they're our biologists and researchers, and they're separate from us. So that's another group of one of our external partners that we serve this data to. And a great example is the bald eagle nesting sites throughout Tennessee. TWRA, as we call our wildlife agency, has been tracking them. But we found that a lot of our state parks, they know of a lot more sites than are in their records. So now we're gonna be able to provide all of those to our wildlife agency. And this is kind of the start. This is our first year. We're only a couple months into this. And we've seen with the bald eagles specific to Reelfoot Lake State Park, they ended up with this wanting a specific Survey 123 app where they can track it over time. So every week they go out and look at what kind of activity is happening at those nests. So we hope this will let us build more specialized apps based on the needs that come up from it.
And to follow up on that, have you all had conversations about like integrating some of that data into like iNaturalist or ERG when there's like possibility for overlap? You know, sometimes you want to keep that data internal, but sometimes you might want to share it out too.
Yeah, definitely. Our Division of Natural Areas and the Wildlife Resources Agency, they both use iNaturalist, so we're going to be serving that data over to them and let them kind of take it from there and see what we can do with it.
When you're collecting natural resource data and you're putting action required, is that going to you, or is that an action that you're expecting your rangers to follow up on themselves?
That's a good point. This is as far as we've gotten on that right now, but we're hoping that we can create triggers, we can create dashboards. That's a big thing. That's why we added a lot of these as filterable items. So we're going to have an action required dashboard where it highlights everything on the map. So people, we have areas. We have 6 different areas in our state parks. The area managers can go on there and see what's happening, look at the thing, what's been collected and what needs action, and maybe even get a policy that's made. So if it is a cultural site, we can get a statewide policy made that of something that's come up recently.
What asset management system is Tennessee State Parks using, and are you going to be integrating that with the Smart Parks system, or have integrated?
Do you mean like facilities assets? We have a system called HIPPO, which is for facilities, and it's new to us, and we're hoping to use an API to bring all our buildings into the one Smart Park area, and then also things like bring in reservations so we can see which cabins are booked the most, what kind of repairs need to be done on those, and see how often they're used, and anything, if it's a cultural building at the same time, like historic building. And yeah, so that is one of our things that we're going to try to do this year, is bring in that data into this virtual world on the management side, not the public side.
Yeah. And so let's follow up question. So you're keeping basically 2 sites, one for internal and
Yeah, all of our assets are done through our maintenance group, and that involves work orders and things that get pushed to their phones, and they submit work orders. So we haven't gotten, GIS hasn't been pulled into that yet, but we're about to. Any other questions?
Again, thanks guys. So just real quick as a call to action real quick,